Hey everybody, it's the Nitty Professor, and today I thought it'd be interesting to look into the topic of the environmental importance of using wool to make garments with. So I have some different samples here, and again I'm inspired by this book. I read the next to the last chapter. I read all the chapters, but the next to the last one was particularly revelatory for me because I've kind of known that wool is good, wool is great, and this whole myth about, oh, it's scratchy, that's, we just have to get over that because I'm wearing a whole completely 100% wool sweater on over a t-shirt. It's not scratchy at all. So the chapter that kind of got me going about this in this book by Sophie Thanhauser is called Wool Fest. And she explains a lot of details about this Wool Fest. It's in Britain, and highly recommend it. But there are just a few paragraphs that I wanted to explore a little bit more deeply. So again, this book is called Worn, A People's History of Clothing. Sophie Thanhauser is the author. It was published in, I want to say 2023. I'm going to check by Vintage Books 2022, and the Vintage Books editions from 2023. So I've made some notes and I've got some various demonstrations here, so I'm gonna knit a little bit on. I started another sweater project, and I think it's pretty exciting because I wanted to use up my remnants of sock yarn, and so this is actually kind of fun. I've got just these tiny little balls, and I hate to not use them. So we'll see how far I get. But, so one of the important concepts from this chapter is the importance of preserving the diversity of sheep. And from what I understand, the purpose of this Wool Fest event, which is in England, is as a sort of platform for what's called the Rare Breeds Survival Trust, which is in England. And according to what I read, that was formed in 1973. It's still going strong. And the main goal is to prevent breeds of sheep from going extinct. And Thanhauser enumerates a few breeds that did go extinct. And according to her, since this Rare Breeds Survival Trust began, no other breeds of British sheep have gone extinct, and they have actually brought some breeds out of near extinction, including the Shetland sheep, which I found interesting. And you all probably know more about some of these breeds than I do. If so, feel free to chime in. But there's something about the smallness of the Shetland sheep that allowed it to be transported easily by boat. And that was one of the reasons why. Its size was particularly important. So what I've learned from this chapter, and I did some more research online, is that sheep are very useful for environmental health. And the wool, and really sheep in general, but the wool in particular, serves as a carbon sequestration system. That's something I did not know until I read this book. So if y'all are ahead of me, feel free to say, haha, I know more than you do, because you do. But I was, pretty intrigued with learning this, because I honestly had no idea. Wool holds 50% of atmospheric carbon by weight. That's pretty impressive. And it's also used as a renewable fertilizer. In fact, a friend of mine here in Brown County has started a business turning wool into pellets. So she raises sheep and she has all kinds of wool and she spins it and stuff. But she was like, I gotta find another good use for it. That, wool is this great, awesome material. So she developed a way to produce pellets from wool and sells it around the area for fertilizer. It releases nutrients into the soil, but it fixes carbon in the topsoil. So when you use wool as a fertilizer, and you can mix it up with other important elements. My yarn's kind of acting up here, which is nothing new. So sheep also are really good for regenerating pastures. They regenerate pastures. And I think part of it is due also not just to the wool, but also to their own pellets, right? Their droppings. I've got something weird going on here. Something is tangled. Did you ever run across that? I have this. Look at this tiny ball of wool. That's like the world's smallest ball of wool. There we go. Got it untangled. So anyhow, regeneration of pastures is another benefit of sheep. So another thing that is stressed in Thanhauser's book is the local production, because, so here's something that is why diversity is so important. And that is because sheep in writ large, okay, so the overall diversity of sheep breeds, they thrive in all kinds of environments, and they thrive in marginal environments, and they can eat vegetation that, if you had like cows grazing there, they would probably just overgraze because they would head for one or two different kinds of foods. But sheep, they can eat, even thistles, they can eat all kinds of things, and given the wide range of breeds that are available, they can exist in all kinds of different environments. They've been around for tens of thousands of years, and over those tens of thousands of years, humans have domesticated sheep in many, many different areas, many, many different environments. And from that standpoint, they can thrive in all kinds of, like where moss grows, or in rocky terrain. I know they're used sometimes to eat the vegetation around solar panel installations, and that's one of the reasons, right? Because they can just, depending on the breed, they can eat all kinds of different stuff. So they're not as hard on the environment from that standpoint, because they also help preserve ecological diversity. So there's a lot of information on the Woolfest that if you get to read this book, read the chapter, you're going to enjoy a lot of the activities, the way they integrate children and all the different breeds, that they have like these parades of rare breeds and things like this at the Woolfest, which it just sounds like it'd be so much fun. What else can I tell you here? So sheep also are good for keeping down invasive species. And I've seen the damage that can be done by invasive species. If you're from like Montana or the overall region of the Northern Plains here, there's this kind of yellow clover that is, it grows really tall, and it has a stocky stem that's very thick and very difficult for most, like you couldn't have cows grazing on it or something because they can't digest it. It's taking over. I was at Bighorn, I think that's what it's called. Little Bighorn, yeah, the park outside of Billings, and you could see how this plant was just kind of taking over all the other vegetation. So to the extent that sheep are useful for keeping down invasive vegetation, that's another really important advantage of breeding them. Let's see here. Another thing so to the extent that we want to support sheep diversity, we can sort of target our purchases of wool. And one thing that's beneficial is to move beyond thinking about just white wool. So in fact, I was going to get it out and I forgot. I have some black Shetland wool that I spun up that I got from a friend of mine. And I think there's more interest now in naturally colored wool. A lot of the like Icelandic wools you can find in different natural colors. So supporting like Gotland, gray wools, black wools, brown wools supports sheep diversity, and we can do that easily with the purchases that we make. And I have a few sort of little exhibits here of some things that I've acquired via gift, purchase, whatever. And here is some roving that I was holding up earlier that my sister got for me, and this is from Georgia, and this is Cotswold wool from the Ornery Shepherd. And I already spun up a companion to this. It's just gorgeous. You can feel it's got some grease left in it. I'll just read what's on the label here. Cotswold is a rare long wool breed native to the Cotswold Hills in western England. thought to be descended from the flocks brought there by the Romans. And this sheep was grown, the wool was milled and dyed in Georgia. So Georgia's playing a role in preserving a rare English breed of sheep. Here's some wool I got from my daughter. This is sock wool. She got it in Scotland. It's from Exmoor sock. And it's got 4 different breeds in it. Exmoor Blueface, Corriedale, Zwartbols, and the other breed is nylon, just so you know. So actually 3 breeds of sheep. But this is an example of, British producers leaning into the idea of expanding, like targeting different breeds of sheep and expanding their production to sort of privilege those rare breeds so that they can be, I like the word rentabel in German. Basically, you can make money off of them, right? We don't want to leave the farmers out in the cold here. Here's another British yarn that I got actually a couple years ago at the Knitting Loft. Recently did a well-received video from there. The company that makes this is Telling Yarns. I don't know if you're familiar with that. And I'm going to go on record here as claiming that steadfast refers to the kind of yarn here, which is a DK weight. It contains 50% Blueface Leicester, 30% Romney, 15% Masham, and 5% Zwartbols. I guess that's how you say that. If you know better than me how to pronounce it, don't hesitate to correct me, because I like to pronounce things correctly, but I don't always. This particular colorway is, I'm going to call it Shrikos. Looks Greek. 100% British from farm to needle. So that's something else I'm going to get into here. I have a kind of companion. I thought that I would do like maybe a hat and a scarf set or something from these two. Don't they go together beautifully? I got these from the Knitting Loft. In fact, it's interesting because they had like just come into the store when I was shopping there, and I was sort of, I was kind of struggling to figure out like, what should I buy from the standpoint of what I would actually make something from. And I had this big box of British wool that had come in, and she allowed me to peek inside, and I found these, and I was like, sign me up. Here's a book that I have, The Field Guide to Fleece. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with this. 100 sheep breeds and how to use their fibers. And this is just a fantastic resource. I've literally just read for fun half of this book. I mean to continue reading it. It's got, here's like an example here. Tells you a little bit about the, so there's a picture, and it gives you the staple length. This looks like it's about going on 3 inches, so a bit on the short side, actually closer to 4. Where it comes from, what dye, how dye works on it, so the effects of dye, and what you might want to use it for. This particular yarn, it says, can be used for a range of items, from warm garments to tweed-like fabrics and household textiles. So a great resource to help us to consciously privilege diversity of sheep breeds in our purchases and our crafting. Oh, I'm going to get a knot in here. Well, that's all right. It's about par for the course. I'm going to have to switch skeins. This is just going to be, I'll show you what I'm working on. It's going to be just random skeins. I'm just going to, every time I run out of a yarn, which I'm about to do, I'm just going to pick another ball that may or may not harmonize, and I'm just going to see what comes of it. What else have I got here? So there are a lot of like positive impacts of breeding sheep, privileging like wool for our crafting and diverse breeds of sheep. And a lot of that has to do with local production, so privileging local markets and avoiding all of the costs of, transporting things all the way from, Australia across to Canada and that kind of thing, which is not that that's a bad thing, but, it's expensive. And that's like arguably less good for carbon sequestration issues. Another thing that I read in the Thanhauser book was that marketing wool to craftspeople supports sheep farmers better because marketing it in bulk, They just don't get as much income from that. And if we want them to live well, then ensuring that they get fair prices for the effort that they put in to raising the sheep for us makes sense. Wool also is good for insulation, though. And I think that's something that they've been promoting in Great Britain. Tell me if I'm wrong, but if I'm not mistaken, that's been like a push because a lot of wool, if the sheep are bred for meat, there are a lot of farmers that just throw the wool away. And, you're going to burn wool. How's that going to help with carbon sequestration? I don't think it's going to. So, there are a lot of comments in the book that I would probably like to review more. She was talking about taking the long view, a sustainable view of like breeding practices and soil use. And she was mentioning some ancient practices, even in England, about what ingredients farmers needed to put in the soil when over, these longer cycles instead of the killer seed from Monsanto, where you have to keep buying the same corn year after year because they made it so that it's totally not fertile. You can't just keep the seeds. Then Thanhauser mentioned the idea of the Fibershed, and I actually looked that up and I did a little research on that. So the Fibershed is related to the watershed concept, and it has to do, and again, if you know something about this that I don't, I would love to have you chime in here, because this is new to me, and I'm learning, and I'm just fascinated. So it has to do with the concept of making cloth close to home. Again, buy local, produce local, building connections to form local production networks. So I went to a website, and there's this fibershed.org, and I will link it for you under the description so that you'll be able to go there, because there's a lot of information that I'm just going to hit some highlights, but you actually might want to read it. It kind of reads a little bit, propaganda-y, just being honest about that, but I think a lot of the information it lines up with other information that I have read. So they have this labeling program. They're calling it Climate Beneficial Verified Wool. So they call it the CBV program. If you are a part of that program and you know something we don't, that'll be really cool for you to chime in. So the program is designed to improve soil health, reduce carbon emissions, and generate revenue for farmers. And one of the big pushes of this effort is that wool can be traced from ranch to garment. So the whole idea of traceable wool. And I think in Great Britain, this is something that is done fairly regularly now. So this initiative has the goal of increasing carbon drawdown from the atmosphere and building a regenerative culture. Now, in conjunction with this, I was watching an episode of Fruity Knitting the other night, and they interviewed Andrea from MYAC, and he made some interesting comments that I think we can kind of build on here. So I went and I looked up information because he was talking about yaks and he was talking about camels. And I was really interested in that because and he's a veterinarian, he sort of was arguing the case that camel fiber is the fiber of the future. Because as biodiverse and as capable as sheep are of grazing in just all kinds of different environments, camels can outdo them. And they, from what he was saying, I was gathering, they're even better at carbon sequestration than sheep. And I read some information. Let me see, I've got some notes here. So they can graze on a huge variety of plants, so this avoids overgrazing versus, say, cows. Another thing that I read was that they have lower methane emissions than, for example, cattle. And that's one of the bad things about cattle is the methane emissions from their rear end is significant, and it's an issue. Yaks, it's the same. They have lower methane emissions, and they can thrive in marginal environments. They can thrive in very frigid, cold environments. From what I looked up, they are very good at converting food into energy. They're extremely efficient. They have a smaller environmental footprint than similar animals, like especially cattle. Less resource consumption. Their manure is good for soil health, and I think that's true for a lot of these ruminants. And they increase soil organic matter. And as far as camels go, they are very adept at seed dispersal because they eat a wide variety of plants, and they can help reduce desertification by transporting the seeds from the plants that they eat across the territories. And their padded feet reduce erosion. So I have some samples here, and I'd be curious how many of you, craft with yak and camel. Here, for example, I have some baby yak yarn. This is wool from Mongolia. It's called Ula and Leah. Maybe you're familiar with this. And it has this delicious sort of, I don't even know what to call this color. It's just a light brown, but it's variegated, and it's soft. Yak is also, I've knit with it before, and I was reading about it at that time and how insulating it is. It's an extraordinarily good insulating fiber. And of course, baby yak is softer, and, it's more the kind of feel that people desire than the adult yak fiber. So there's some information on here. The yak wool from this brand comes from free-range animals raised by traditional nomadic herders. So there's also an argument to be made, and I've seen this made also, that preserving the culture of nomadic herders is a worthy endeavor too. There's, human diversity, very important. The unique, bitterly cold Mongolian winters force livestock to produce incredibly fine fibers to sustain them through the cold. So yeah, I'm excited to try this out. I've forgotten now even where I bought this, but I need to do something with it. Look at that. And as far as camel goes, here's an interesting experiment. So I lucked into some camel from my university because they're no longer going to have a fiber art program. And this is camel that I have carded with wool thrown in. And I probably was shooting for about a 50-50. I talked to a spinner in Colorado at this store. I actually did a video about the store. It's Elbert, Colorado. It's called the Woolly Wool Workshop, I believe. And I told her I had this camel fiber. And she said, oh, if you're carding that, you want to mix it with wool. So sign me up, right? I did. And I also have some Camel Yarn. This is from Dakota's Fun, which is up in the state above me, North Dakota. And the company is the Dakota Fiber Mill. That's where it's made. Maybe you have experience there. If you've been there and done a workshop, let us know, because I kind of want to do that. So this yarn happens to be 60% camel and 40% alpaca. So as you can imagine, it's extremely soft. And I was thinking to myself, as far as this yarn goes, so obviously camels aren't white, right? So if we go this route, which Andrea from M-Yak, My Yak, it's an Italian company, is really proposing or advocating very strongly, then, we would have to change our mindset a little bit about the kinds of colors that we can get. But can you imagine all the colors that would have this golden camel hue and how it would sort of affect the palette? This whole idea of white, right? This is an old idea. I was raised with it. It had to be white bread, white flour, white sheets. Why? And a lot of that, it's so destructive for the environment. All this bleaching and stuff. And so I'm really attracted to the idea of privileging more, like your gray sheep, your black sheep, your golden camel, your black yak, gray yak, because the whole addiction that we've had to white is this a blank canvas for doing whatever the heck we want with, and using all kinds of probably dangerous chemicals in the process. It's got its own toxic side. So I feel myself wanting to embrace this, like the future of fiber, that, you know, people are going to use tons of camel and a lot of yak and this huge variety of sheep. And we don't have to keep worrying about everything has to be this white palette. Can have like just white highlights, right? How fun would that be? So in any case, yeah. Highly recommend this book. I've learned a lot from it, and some of you have suggested I should go back to some of the other chapters, and I might. Silk would interest me, cotton, especially with regard to the history of the United States. Cotton is a really potent question, and synthetics. I use sock wool with nylon in it, so I'm guilty of that. And I want to improve as far as like the amount of nylon that I use in my socks. But other than that, it's the rarest thing in the world for me to go out and buy synthetics, even in my clothes. You know, polyester maybe, like a polyester cotton blend, but cotton. This book really lays out how cotton is a huge issue. So that might be another chapter to tackle. Would be the information here on cotton. If you have an opinion, like if you would like me to delve into any specific section of this book because you're familiar with it, or you just kind of want to, have someone like share your concerns or whatever, let me know. There's a lot in here, and I got another book that one of you recommended. Or I think it's really great when you all recommend books to me because I want to learn more, and especially to the extent that I want to incorporate this information in my novels. Not that my novels are going to be academic treatises. They're romance novels, but I think it's a service that I can perform to, so even if it's oblique, just to reference, there's a yarn store in my book, there's a fiber guild, there are yarn bombers in my book, and there are a lot of people that kind of come in and out, and they have different concerns. And I would like to think that a lot of the characters in my novel could be role models for how we should interact with fiber. So, love to hear your ideas. Thank you for subscribing. Thank you for all your comments. I really enjoy them. I enjoy learning from you. Hope you have a great week. If you're working on reading this book, enjoy. If you're knitting some camel, enjoy that. Some yak, enjoy that. Or just some smart pulse, or however you say it. Y'all take care. We'll talk soon. Bye.